Good evening, everyone. Well, we all stuck in traffic? I'm Joe Cerisi. I'm the representative for the 146th. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight for this conversation dealing with transportation. As we all know, and all of us who reside in this part of Montgomery County live the terror of the traffic every single day. As we sit on 422 from anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on where we're heading out to, if it's not even longer, between the accidents and the traffic and the congestion. And tonight we have two great guests here that I'll get to in a minute on how we got them here. Well, they came by plane. But to talk about a possible, not a definitive, a possible alternative to rail. You know, as a legislator, our job is to look for solutions. And when I ran on a transportation platform. I, for 16 years, traveled to the Kimmel Center sitting on 422 and knew what the nightmare was in each direction. Many nights or days, it was 3 hours sometimes to get back and forth by car. And I said, this is ridiculous. I grew up in New York. New York was known to have a train to get in and out of Manhattan, and everybody rode that train in and out of the city. So this is a huge issue that I want to talk about. Before I get to that, I want to thank Montgomery County Community College for hosting this event. It's a great campus, a great place here in Pottstown to have. I'd like to acknowledge all of my staff that's here. I have Alex Teplikoff over here. Put your hand up, Alex. Pam Hacker, Mike Hayes, Sarah Calvin, and those who help us be successful in our office. We have Steve Hacker over in this corner, who has been a big help to us over this transitional period. And my wife, Pam, is in the back. We do have two offices. One is here in Pottstown at the Tri-County Senior Center. We're open Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Pam is usually at that office all the time. Please come out. Our bigger office is in Limerick at the Parktown Center Plaza, and we're open 8:30 to 4:30, so I'm giving the selfless plug. There's some information on the services, too, that we have back there. But so why we're here tonight? So when we won the election, we made it our goal to make sure that we looked at what we ran on. And Pam Hacker and I had a conversation one night, and I said, Pam, why don't you go on the internet and just see what options are out there? Because we all know that the train here that runs through Pottstown, the tracks are owned by Norfolk Southern. So we have no right to say we're going to put a commuter rail on. We have to get permission from Norfolk. We have to do upgrades to get the track back. And for years, and everyone in this room has heard, oh, we need a commuter rail, we need a commuter rail, we need a commuter rail. 20 years I've almost lived here, it's 20 years we've been saying it. So Pam did a little research one night online. She said, I came across a video. I don't know anything about this. It's called a trackless tram, but it looks pretty good. So we watched the video, and the next night, about 11 o'clock, 10:30 or so, I turned to my wife and said, I'm gonna call Australia. And she's like, yeah, whatever. I picked up the phone and I called, we watched Peter in this video, and I called Peter Newman. I found him online. He was a professor at Curtin University, and I called the university and I said, I'm calling from America and would like to speak to Mr. Newman. They gave me a cell phone. He picks up his cell phone. He's going to a function. He's like, call from America. Who the heck is this? I said who I was, and he said, well, I'll get back to you. I figured, yeah, I'm never going to hear from this guy. He called me back. We started a conversation. And he told me, which was extremely interesting, that he taught at the University of Pennsylvania for a while. So he was well aware of the Reading Railroad and our communities that were out here. I was like, well, that's really interesting. And we started emailing back and forth. About 3 weeks ago, he called and said, we're coming to the United States. We want to present on the trackless tram. I said, Peter, I don't have money to bring you to the United States right now. He goes, don't worry about it. We're coming to the United States. I want to present on the trackless tram. So I thought it was a blessing in disguise. And as he came to the United States, he's also Saturday presenting in Charlottesville, Virginia. Another place where he taught, and another phone call that he got out of the blue from the United States. So it was like it was in the stars to set this up. Tonight we're going to hear about an option, like I said, to look at an alternative, to move our residents, to give them the ability not only to work in the region, but to be able to get to Philadelphia, to be able to get to Reading, another way rather than have to sit in traffic. It is something new. It is something different. It's something for all of you to ponder and think about. It's also something for us to think about, what other options do we have? We can't be held hostage any longer that there is no option because we're in Western Montgomery County. It's time for a change, and if we don't start looking for that change, it'll never happen. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Please ask any questions you have of Peter. Peter has a great presentation. He's also here with Charlie Hargrove, the guy standing over here, the other Australian guy that's here in the room. Charlie did fly in a day ago, so he's a little probably on Australian time. But thank you all very much. Peter?
Thank you, my friend. That's yours.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Joe's made us feel very much at home. And when I came to Pottstown today, lots of Potts places, aren't there? Who was Mr. Potts? Anyway, I felt very at home here. And I want to show you a little bit about why that is, because I come from a similar place in Fremantle in Perth. Fremantle is the old part of the city, the old port city. Similar kind of industrial history, really, to many of the old towns of Pennsylvania. So part of that story is relevant to you. But I want to talk about that beast, that new looking, funny looking vehicle as well. So I've had 2 days in Pennsylvania, so I should know a lot about it, shouldn't I? This is meeting the governor yesterday. He was really interested in the trackless tram. Look at him. He's saying, whoa, what is this? And Joe's looking a bit bemused as well. And then last night I went back to Penn and taught the students there. And it was really nice, feeling as though I was back in town, back home. So, but my early story is more relevant to Pottstown. This is my hometown, this is Fremantle. Now it's a 19th century town, a heritage place, very beautiful, and it was dying in the 1970s. There was a lot of change happening, not doing very well. So how do you get it back to life? How do you regenerate an old town? That's a big question. And we started a group called the Fremantle Society that had that as its goal. We wanted to create an economy around the fact that this was a beautiful place that really needed to be restored and given a new life. And we started by stopping a freeway that was planned through the middle of that. I mean, come on. But it wasn't hard to win politically. The traffic engineers thought it was terrible. I mean, this is a road that should be built. But we beat them, and that was a good start. But then they closed our train down. It's a crazy thing to do, isn't it? And this is in a city, this is in 1979. When was yours closed? 1981? And that's me. I was a local government councillor as well as being an academic at the local university. And I was outraged by this, and I said, I think we've got to try and save this. And a lot of people said, you'll never be able to do it. And so we started the Friends of the Railways. And we ran a campaign for 4 years and threw the government out and won. Got our train back. But that wasn't all. We did more than that. We actually were able to then use that as the revitalising process that helped revive the city. And the city has hardly look back. This is the new city centre, which is just about finished, and a lot of money is being invested in the place, and a lot of people want to live there. It's certainly a lot harder to get a place to live there, which is one of the good problems that you want to have. And we're even looking at putting more public transport in through the city of a kind that is like the TT, the trackless tram. But one of the things that happened was that it was a spark that lit the rest of the city up, saying, we want a train too. And that's the reality. If you got your train back, you'd need a lot more of good public transport across the whole of Philadelphia. And this is what happened. So we actually, the 3 old lines there were electrified and brought back to life. But we then put a rail line right to the north and right to the south, deep into car-based territory, where you wouldn't normally put a train. It was not designed for a train, and it's very like the kind of suburbs in Philadelphia that don't have a train now. So would it work? And it did. We built along the freeway a faster service that went right past the traffic, does 160 kilometres an hour, and it was quite cheap. And it's actually making a profit, that line, but it's carrying the equivalent of 8 lanes of traffic. Now that's the sort of thing you can do. Traffic engineers find this hard to understand, but if you put an extra lane on the Schuylkill, it'll fill just so quickly. But if you put a trackless tram there, or a good public transport, a good transit service, it can carry 6 to 8 lanes, equivalent. So that's the thing that we discovered and found works. So it was very popular very quickly. This is at the opening of it. And one of the ways is that you bring people to it by bus to the stations, and they go over the top of the freeway there, and you go down from the bus on an escalator with the same ticket straight onto the train. So there's not much time wasted, and you can quickly go from the bus there down onto the train. Now that kind of interchange, that integration was critical to it, because like your suburbs, there's not going to be many people able to walk to the train like they do in the dark brown areas on this map. But we very quickly, this is Adelaide's service where Charlie comes from. Sorry, Charlie, but it's not cracking up much on train. But we took off. We've gone from 7 million passengers a year to now over 70 million in a 15-year period. So it really worked. And we are a car-based city that they said, you'll never get people out of their cars. Well, they did, because it was better. And we started developing land around the stations, and the city of Perth has really had a huge revival, because 100,000 people now go through that train line and there's no parking needed for them. And even 30 kilometres out into the suburbs, centres were being revived and regenerated. So I also did the academic thing and started studying these cities around the world, because what I found was it wasn't just Perth, of course. Every city in the world was facing problems with too many cars and not enough good options. And so these are some of the books that I've done from the 80s through that blue book, and then the most recent one, The End of Automobile Dependence. The blue book I wrote at Penn, and that was where I was teaching a course on sustainability in cities, which was launched in the White House. There he is, Al Gore. It's a while ago, isn't it? But that was really nice for me that this was accepted and given a bit of a run. But it's essentially about how cities cope with cars. And what we concluded is you really need fixed transit services. Fixed meaning they run on a fixed route rather than the flexibility of the buses that go all over the place, because they take too much time and they get stuck in the traffic. And that was an ongoing story in all of our work. So I'm just going to show you one table here. And if you look at this, there's lots of numbers, but look at the ones that are over 1. Because if it's over 1, That means the transit is going faster than the traffic. Now, in the top, it's both trains and buses. And the buses dominate and it slows it down. None of the cities of the world have a public transport system that's faster than traffic. But if you just look at the rail parts of it, the bottom parts, you find that most cities in the world are now over 1, and the global average is over 1 since the 1990s. But American cities are still not quite up to the 1 because there are many cities that don't have good rail services. The Australian cities are over 1, the European cities have been there for some time, and the Asian cities never really left that. All of the cities there, you'd never get around there without travelling by train because it's so difficult in the traffic. Very dense cities with narrow roads and not much space for cars. So that's the kind of thing that we've been doing, collecting data on cities and showing what needs to be done and telling stories about the ones that have done it. So around the world in recent times, there's been a massive rail revolution happening. It's called the Second Rail Revolution. 82 Chinese cities have built metros. They've got 20,000 kilometres of high-speed rail. And many of those Chinese cities are now, the car use is going down. Indian cities, 51 of them are building metros, all the Middle Eastern cities. So it's quite a change. And it's pretty easy to see why it's helpful to cities and their economies. Because if you have that many cars, they can fit into 3 buses or 1 light rail. And all the space that you save by doing that, that's where the city can be regenerated. That's where you can make the cities work much better for people. So our book, The End of Automobile Dependence, is essentially about that revival, the regeneration of cities, which is happening all across America now. The centre of Philly is much more interesting and alive now than it was when I was teaching there. And that's the case in most of the inner areas of American cities. They've come back to life. But only if they've got a rail service. That's pretty much it, because they have to be very walkable areas where people can live and quickly get around and meet other people, because that's where the knowledge economy jobs are going. So that's the big competitive advantage now. And places like Washington DC and Portland that have got good rail are now finding their economic growth is increasing, their car use is decreasing. So you don't have to have car use for economic growth. Now the BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit, has tried to be like a train, but they get stuck. They bunch up like that. This is in Guangzhou, and they haven't really been very successful. So we're looking at rail, and then the question comes, and some people are saying this, you won't need public transport because we're going to have autonomous vehicles. They're going to fix it all for us, all right? Let me show you. Because autonomous cars, they're not really here yet, but we're getting an idea about what kind of service they're going to provide. But we do have autonomous transit because it's what high-speed rail and metro rail is. It's called signalling by the railway people, but it's essentially autonomous. They don't need drivers, but they use drivers to help guide and to override if need be. But a vehicle going at speed down a track usually needs some kind of guidance to manage it. So it really depends on what kind of city you want. Do you want lots of cars buzzing around all over the place looking for people, or do you want something that's more fixed and available like a transit system? And when you look at that picture again, this is what autonomous vehicles are going to be like. They're saying they're going to be like in a troop of cars going 100 kilometres an hour with 1 metre between them. Now, if that was the case, moving along like that, you wouldn't have any pedestrians there. It'd be incredibly dangerous. And And if there was a pedestrian, they'd all stop because they're all meant to censor the movement of people around them. So you just won't have that kind of thing happening in centres of cities or any real urban areas. So it's possible to have them in areas where they go around and pick people up and take them to a fixed transit system and then go fast down that system. That's, for me, the conclusion I've made. But if you look at high-speed rail, for example, this is the Japanese high-speed rail. It's 50 years old now. They've never had one accident, and they have autonomous character in them. And increasingly, we've got little buses that are now doing it. This is one. You can see the black tyre mark there. It's always on that track. So even though it looks as though it's not on a track, it is. It's being programmed to go on that track. And this is what the trackless tram does. So the trackless tram, it's come from China, it's come from high-speed rail, and they've put it in these innovations in a bus, and it's turned into something that's very like a train. So it's got batteries on the roof, doesn't need the overhead catenaries. It is charging, and it gets recharged at stations very quickly and easily. And it's guided by GPS, same way Uber is guided to pick you up. It's a satellite connection, and it's got connections to LiDAR, which is sensors on buildings, and it's following that white line. Now, it can be overridden. You can press a button and drive around anywhere, and that's what the driver has done to move from one side to the other like that. So it's got some flexibility, but it is actually on a track, but it's an optically guided track, so you can't actually see it, and it means you don't have to build it. You don't have to put these rails along the street, which means it's a lot cheaper. And so no steel tracks, but optical tracks. Now, there's a few others that are starting to appear from Europe, but they're mainly buses. They don't have that optical guidance. This is an electric bus in France. And the big question is, are they fixed or flexible? Well, we went and had a ride. Charlie and I went over there and had a good look at it. And the reality is it is very train-like. It doesn't sway. If you use a bus, you know what it's like, especially when the driver swings the wheel, it sways and it bumps along. There's very little bumpiness, and you can read on it, and kids can run along it at speed. So this is me on the trackless tram in China. Watch this little kid. This is doing 70 kilometres an hour through the city, and he's completely at ease. No parents grabbing him. That to me was the test that brought me over. Now, I've been trying to save railways and push railways all my life, and now I'm pushing a bus. But it's not really a bus, is it? That looks like a train and feels like one. It's very different. So it helps the autonomous technology is what's doing it. It's got bogies from railways in it. It's double bogies, and it senses the bumps coming up. It can see the bumps and it can ride over them. It's very clever. So watch this. This is the driver, and he's just sitting there watching it as it follows the line. And if he wanted to, he could press that red button, which he did a couple of times, and you immediately got the sway as it, because he pushes the wheels around. But this is what it's like to ride, and he overrides it in order to go around an accident or to go back to the depot at night where it gets recharged. This is the headquarters of the organisation that produces these trains. We don't have any link to them, but we certainly were very keen to see their product. They're still finishing the trials of it all. It's the only city with it. We are hoping to get one going in Perth this year, but I think it's a major innovation. And this is where it gets recharged very quickly at stations. That little thing comes up and it can quickly allow it to be recharged. And if you, the station box comes with this, and if you look at this, you can see where you come in and you go through a gateway, and it enables wheelchair access. So they call it the ART, it's autonomous rail transit. It's half the weight of a bus, so it's not going to damage the roads, and it's very easy to make it very quick and very attractive for people to use. It only costs 3 to 4 million Australian, so roughly say 3 million US for a 3-car set with a box type station that goes with it. So if you want a 10-kilometre system, you multiply it by 10. Now that's nothing like the cost of light rail or most of the heavy rail systems. For example, in Sydney, the Sydney light rail is 175 million per kilometre, and it's taken 4 years and is still not finished because I've had to dig up all the roads and find out the services and get into it. It's difficult. This is where it gets recharged along with all their other electric buses, and this is a control centre that manages it. So is it a bus or a tram? Is it fixed or flexible? Well, I basically say it's a fixed tram. It's got everything about it. The track is real. The autonomous track helps with the ride quality. It's got a clear way that everyone can see. It's recharging at stations, that fixes it. And it sort of connects in a way that makes it very fixed and very needed. But it's also flexible because if there's an accident, you can go round it and drive it other than along that fixed route. So it could depend a lot on the land development. Now this is our city. We've got a consortium we've put together along a 20-kilometre route. There's 5 local governments and our university have joined up, and we're going to try and build this ourselves without government money. Now the way we can do this because it's so cheap. Now the government is needed to be part of the whole process, and the local governments themselves are desperately want this service, but it's something where you will make the money from the land development, from the urban regeneration that is desperately wanted by all of those local governments through there. They've got projects that just aren't happening. They need a good public transport service to unlock the value in the land and create the urban regeneration opportunity. So you do it with both of those things together. And the money you make from that, you put into building the tram. So that's what we're calling the entrepreneur rail model. And all of the councils along that route want something like this. And if you look at this is the kind of drawing they've done, because it's, of course, lots of green things and young people looking cool and birds flying. There's not a car in sight. And they're the trackless trams, and you've got medium density development happening, and it's all cool. That's what they want, and they want to unlock that by having this combination of the trackless tram and urban regeneration. So it really fixes it, and we're calling this the entrepreneur rail model because it is a bit different to a very top-down, engineering-oriented solution that government funds. It's based on land development. Now, the amazing thing is, that's how we did it. How was Pottstown built? It was built because there was a private railway built and private trams were built in Philadelphia as real estate developments. That's how it happened, all around the world. In England, in Australia, these are one of the examples in England, and these are two of the tramway estates that were built in Perth, all from the 1890s through, even earlier with the trains, through to the 1940s when the car took over and we said, oh, public transport's not working much now, so we're going to have to make that a government responsibility and it's a welfare thing only. And the cars took over and we had a few buses to help us. That was it. Now that era is over because it's failing. The traffic is slowing down and we now have to get a better option. And that's what Joe has sensed. He's saying you need a better option out here. Everyone in the world is saying that. This is not new to you. You experience it on a daily basis, but it is something that is happening around the world. So the interesting thing is Japan started this a while ago. All of the rail service, anyone been to Japan? The trains over there are fantastic and they're all private. And the new trains they're building, like that one out there, that red line there, the Tsukuba Express, that was done entirely with land development around the stations paying for it. You say, oh, that's just Japan. Wouldn't happen here. Well, it has. In Florida, they built the Brightline train. It's linked up all of the main towns in Florida, and it's been built along a freight line with land development paying for it. No government money. But the local governments all helped to assemble the land and enable that development to occur. It worked so well and the patronage was so high so quickly, it's only been running a year, that Richard Branson from Virgin has bought it and created Virgin Trains in the US, and he wants to build 20 more across the US. So maybe you should get in the line. But because the reality is those freight lines can make money now out of passenger traffic and land development around stations and regenerate the old towns at the same time. That's the vision that I'd hope we can bring to this place and say, let's see if it would work here. So the trackless tram is better in speed and capacity than buses, similar to light rail, similar in ride quality, similar in land development potential, much better in cost. It doesn't disrupt the local economy building it. Its implementation is very quick. You can put it in in a weekend. And overall, it's pretty good. So we have produced a manual which anyone can get if you want to get online, and that's the website, SBE. I've got one here, and there's lots of these little YouTube films. It seems I'm a social media star because even Joe Cerisi saw it, and Mark Cave, who's here from Charlottesville. So it's had 3 million hits, one of them. The trial, we're going to trial it in Perth, and we've got lots of case studies now happening across Australia in the cities that we've got. But also, these are the cities that have contacted us and said, we want you to come and help us. 3 in Africa. So, final word about where it fits. Now, if you look at any city looks like this. They've got an old walking centre, like the centre of Philly, fantastic old walking city. Then the tram and train-based city that followed corridors, and then around it, all the car-based suburbs. There's 3 kinds of cities in each city. It's called the theory of urban fabrics. If you look at London, the green area in the middle is the old walking city. Then the trams and the subway and the trains spread the city out in the blue areas. And the red areas are actually quite small in London because they nearly always have got good public transport. But we were there on Monday and talked to the Lord Mayor and the Transport for London, and they can see where some of the bus bunching in the city centre would work and some of the corridors that are not very effective. They could run down there, and even the new areas like Sutton. So what about Philly? You've got this beautiful map here. It's worth a look. The dark areas are the dense areas, and they always have trains as part of them, apart from out here. And these are the little towns that are quite reasonable size and density, and they don't have a train. And they should. So it's time to start that, but there's lots more you could do in terms of the connectors across the suburbs. And so, and you've got the old trams that are the trolleys, their life is nearing the end. They've got to be replaced with something as well. But very quickly you get to the suburbs with the traffic, and it's just constantly like this, isn't it? So, and you've got these empty train lines, and you say, well, gee, we could get 8 lanes of traffic on that. And there's room on the 422, so we're going to look at that and how it's possible to use the shoulder there. We call it the breakdown lane. And a trackless tram could run along there, and if there was a broken down car, you can go around it because it's flexible enough to do that. And there's even possibilities of going down the middle of such a road. What about Pottstown? What a beautiful place. I loved it. And you think, wow, how easy would it be to bring back to life the old station and the beautiful old main street and link it to the 422. So that's our perspective, and we want to work on this and try to bring it together into some kind of perspective along with all the other options that are on the table. So the best thing we can do is get some questions from you and find out what you think about it, because this won't work unless you guys are behind it. In the back.
You said the ART runs on LR, the LADAR and the satellite, and this lane, you know, the lines down the road.
Following the white line, yeah.
Okay, how would all that work in bad weather? We get a lot of snow around here.
Yep.
So that's my question.
Yeah, look, it was the first question I got from the politicians yesterday as well. Look, China has a lot of bad weather too. It is being designed by them to work in all their cities. They've got their high-speed rail, they've got their metro systems, and they need the connectors across to bring people to those stations. And they have certainly cities that have got a lot of snow and ice. So you have to imagine the satellite is up there, and it can, you know, Uber doesn't break down when it's snowing, does it? It's linked. For the most part, yeah. That's why it has all the other things as well. So they're on the sides of buildings, the sensors, all the way down the track, and the white line. So if the white line is snowed out, I bet it would still work. But that's what needs to be tested. And Joe's got this idea. Why don't we get the Chinese to give us one and we'll test it here?
So we could be the test market.
Okay, here. Whoa, we got 5 questions.
How comfortable do you feel dealing with the Chinese security-wise?
Yeah, more comfortable than Donald. Yeah, look, it's probably a spy tram. It's going to be looking at us and checking us out.
And tracking us.
I'm not quite sure what it would see of value. It's not like Huawei, is it? You know, I mean, okay, there's people worried about Huawei. Look, I think they're just being clever at inventing this, and it will be very quickly spread to other parts of the world. The Europeans don't like the fact that the Chinese have done something quicker than them. They're used to the Chinese copying, but no, they've done it. And I'm quite happy to accept that they've put the the research into it and come up with something special. And we're not going to say that's the only thing, but in the bidding process, if the others don't come up to scratch, then they'll win. And that's all that should matter.
In areas, you've had some areas which are a little more congested. Does it share roadway in some of those areas, like downtown Denver? I don't know if you're familiar with there.
Yep,
I mean,
helped
it's
with
bus
Denver
shuttle
on
there, but
the fast track system. I was
yeah.
working away there for many years. Look, the clear edge you can get a laneway to enable it to run, the better.
Right.
But it can go in mixed traffic, and
Okay.
you can get it there immediately and then start clearing out if you want. It's not like you have to spend a lot of money, make a perfect
Right.
runway for it,
But
because
It allows you to get to a concentration of people
Yeah.
and then have transit strips. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I think there'll be lots of experiments about how to make that work. It's just a better vehicle altogether, and it's likely to attract the land developers around it, and that's the thing that attracted me to it. Okay, we have.
Yeah, two engineering questions. How quickly does it recharge?
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
second one is how feasible would it be technologically and economically to inductively charge it from the road?
Yeah, they looked at the inductive charging is done in Europe on a few of those light rail. It's very expensive. This is the lithium-ion batteries are really so much cheaper now, and they're getting cheaper every year and more range. So the one we went on, it has a range of 20 kilometres before recharging needed. The one this year is going to be 50 kilometres. Now, so there are three ways of doing the recharging, and combinations can be done in any city. So at a station, it can recharge in 30 seconds. So that little catenary comes up, 30 seconds will do. Otherwise, if you have to do longer, it's not sensible because people aren't going to wait. At the end of the route, when you're turning around and need to come back, they occasionally do a 10-minute recharge that's more significant. And overnight, they recharge it a deep recharge. So it does all three, and this is pretty new, you know, electric transit with batteries, but it's been a while coming. But the lithium-ion batteries, they are a real breakthrough. Now we're putting them into houses, we're putting them into cars. We've already got them in our phones and our just about everything that's got a battery. So it's really a breakthrough. And by the way, lithium is produced in Western Australia, where I come from. And people ask us, they say, aren't you going to run out of lithium? Well, since the price has gone up, we've got 8 new mines in Western Australia. We have dominated the market, and we're not going to do an OPEC on you. And all the other battery metals, they're there as well. So we're going to have a whole range of them available, and they'll be fully tracked and ethically produced. It's not going to be a problem. It's a crustal element. It's not going to run out, and you can recycle it. It's not toxic. It's really good. So there are good reasons for having lithium-ion batteries. Now, you up the back is very keen to ask a question.
Are there businesses that we should be buying stock in order to entice them to come here? As basically communities put out municipal bonds and such,
Yeah.
are there companies that we should be looking at to say, hey, we want to look at your stuff, we'll invest in you if you invest in us?
I would be the last person in the world to ask about where you invest. I probably shouldn't, because I'm, as an urban planner, you know where development's going to happen, and I could have made money. I haven't. You could ask Mark Kay there, he's the entrepreneur who's made a lot of money. But superannuation pension funds are all looking for investment of this kind to get into. And they're the ones who back the Brightline. They're going to back, I think, a lot of new rail lines and new trackless tram lines. They will back it. If you can get this combination right with land development and the new transit system, this is going to be the new economy. And if you want to get into that and invest in it, go for it. I don't think you'll lose money over it. You would.
Two-part question. General Electric just sold off a big chunk of their locomotive business to some place called Tech or something like that. I'm not sure what it stands for. But Erie, I would imagine that employment level drop commensurate with what happened with General Electric, might be interested in trying to explore what, you know, the technology is it something they can manufacture. That's question number one, or point number one. Second question would be, when you recharge them, would you be able to generate, I don't know the correct engineering term, I probably should have asked, you had to ask the question, enough current that you could generate it with solar panels or wind power or
Sure.
whatever? Is there some way to partner with that industry to create jobs that way?
Absolutely. I like the solar bit. It's also one of the great attractions is that if you're building stations with buildings all around it, feeding into it, why not put PVs on the rooftops, and you've created a solar electric tram. And we have to go this way. This is the future. And you can also have the little electric shuttles, autonomous vehicle shuttles, the riding on-demand type shuttles that will take you from your home to the station. They could all feed in as well and get recharged from that same solar. So we can start to see how it will actually be a better city, and it'll be without any oil, no coal, it'll fade away. And it's not that hard. Now my city, in Perth, we like to think we do the right thing sometimes, but we had no policy about solar energy in our state. The federal government was Trump-like, and yet 30% of our households have put solar PVs on the rooftop, because we get a lot of sunshine, and it's half the price if you wanted to buy it in America. Somehow or other, the small businesses have done really well. That 30% is now the equivalent of 1,000 megawatts of power. It's the biggest power station in the state. And it's all happened with ordinary people buying it, and it's fitting into the grid, and it's not disrupting it. So the future is unveiling quite quickly. It's not necessarily due to governments. Governments need to get out of the way sometimes, and they didn't get in the way of that. So I see this as one of these disruptive innovations. It's going to come in quite quickly. And those cities that say, oh, it's too much of a change, we can't do that. We're Americans, we don't get out of our cars, or whatever. You'll find excuses. You'll just miss the boat, because this is a really good innovation. And it's like a smartphone. Not too many places said no to a smartphone. Well, we've got to hang on to the old landlines. They're much better, you know. Sometimes you've got to go with these changes, and this is one that I think is going to take off. Yeah.
Yeah, that just reminded me that we missed the boat on the maglev trains, which they
Yep.
use in Japan. They were designed, it was developed by American
Yeah.
students, and nobody in America would use it.
Yeah, well, the maglev is kind of going okay. It's very expensive though, so they didn't actually put it into all their new metro lines. They're more traditional
They used it
rail.
for a while.
Yeah, well, they are using it, the Shanghai system, and there's one in Japan as well. And that does 400 kilometres an hour, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, look, I think they'll probably perfect it, and then you'll be able to buy it back.
And our students that developed it didn't.
Yeah. Oh, look, we developed the photovoltaic cells in
Yeah.
Australia, and we first developed, we were making them there. Then the PhD student who developed it went back to China and became a billionaire making it all there. And the world gained from that because they could mass produce it and bring the price down. We couldn't have done that. So sometimes you need that, even though they're Chinese.
How wide a lane do you need for the
Yeah,
traffic?
just an ordinary lane. And it can be different sizes. You can make a narrow one if you need it. but it is a simple lane-wide traffic, and it carries the equivalent of 6 lanes of traffic on that.
Two things. What is the impact on infrastructure when the population moves as the property gets developed and worth more money? What happens to the residents, the residential areas? And what happens to the infrastructure that's needed for all of those people moving to different places because of quote-unquote gentrification?
Yep. This is a very real question we've had to deal with in my city, which did get gentrified quickly, but it was a lot better than decline. When you have economic decline setting in and the services are disappearing, the schools are closing down, all of that, it's a terrible thing. And we had to fight like mad to reverse that. And once it took off, then you had another problem. It's getting too expensive and people are leaving who really should be there. So you have to constantly deal with that. But you don't stop the gentrification in order to create more equitable situations, because equitable poverty is not great. So I know what you're saying, and there are ways of doing it. So it's important to ensure that part of the development, the land development that you're getting, has affordable housing in it. And you can do that. There are many mechanisms for doing it, and it is entirely feasible to regulate for that and to enable. We have a lot of government land that can be used for that purpose as well. So we've got the Department of Housing totally involved in our project, and they raise this question all the time. And the Canadians do it well. They make 1/3 of all their new housing either affordable or social housing.
That's a lesson we in the United States have to learn. We don't do it very well.
Yeah, well, you did.
At all.
A lot of New York, of course, has still got that. Yeah, over the back, and then you...
Kind of an observation question on that. At least if a source of it is infrastructure,
Yeah.
creating infrastructure for workforce and for the ability to put jobs in the local community and for people from the community to be able to get to those jobs in King of Prussia. So at least it's not just a shock social gentrification.
Yeah.
There's something to it.
Yeah, and you can make them here. There's no reason at all why those Australians...
We've made things in Pottstown before.
Yeah, I know. And we've talked to the Chinese about can they be manufactured in the city where they're going to be used, and they say that's the model we would like. So they would do that. Who was next? I think you were next here.
Are there safety concerns with the lithium batteries?
Safety, it's not a toxic material. What is it? You can pick up the lithium in a powder form, not toxic at all.
Catching fire?
Oh, catching fire. No, the early lithium-ion batteries, some of them did, and they quickly got around that, and that's been regulated away, that particular form. There's about 20 different kinds of lithium-ion batteries, ion it is, I-O-N, and the different ions that are used. They have vanadium, manganese, nickel, cobalt, vanadium, all of these things are in there, and different combinations of them. And they've been able to produce them now that are quite safe. It was a bit of a problem to start with.
It was.
Yeah, but not any longer.
Wouldn't want to see a big fire.
No, you don't. Yeah.
When you put a bid out, is it possible to structure with the people who are capable of manufacturing these things to say, hey, to be a successful bidder, you have to agree to
Make it
license
here.
it in America and
Yeah.
come in and bring people up to speed?
That's how
to
you
do
do
that?
it. Yeah.
You can do
In the
it.
procurement process, in your bid, you
Yeah,
say,
you make it a requirement.
everyone, if you want to comply with this bid, you have to make a bid.
Yes.
And you have to make a land development around the stations that will create X number of houses, and from this you will provide X dollars towards the kitty that will build the tram.
Yes.
That's how you do it.
Right.
It's just a bidding process along. It's
Maybe
not that hard.
The Chinese would be amenable to something like that?
Oh, well, I'd say any of the producers would, because all they want to do is sell their product, and as long as it fits in. And the operators, they just want to operate it. So they need to partner with the land development side of it, as well as with the local government and the community saying what they want. And then, it's a bit of a complicated business, isn't it? It's not like the top down. It's a lot easier just to come in with an engineer and say, right, this is what you're going to get. Ah, right. Well, sometimes it isn't right. Sometimes they want to just take the 422 and add another lane on the side where the shoulder is. It won't solve it. That's one of the things on the table that the PennDOT engineer told us today.
I would just guess that if you could tie it to added employment in whatever
Yeah,
area
yeah.
you're putting it in,
That's the
someone's
way.
going to want to
Sure.
buy
It's
into that.
entirely feasible to do.
One of the things, John, I'll answer that question. One of the things that we will do and that we're looking to do from this point forward is a complete study to look at all those options. That's what we said, beyond the train, other transportation options. And to look at how it doesn't have to be this per se, but maybe it is this, and how this would work. So sitting down with PennDOT, sitting down with our planners, sitting down with the county and saying, how do we implement something like this? What will we need to do to bring this to market? I mean, Peter alluded to it, and we had this conversation this afternoon, and I said it. I'd love to see that the product comes here to be assembled. We are able to create jobs in our community at the same time of curing the traffic problems that we have. And becoming the test pilot for the nation on a new technology. Now, will it work? Won't work? Will it work in the snow? Will it work in the ice? Well, if you're willing to pilot a program here with us, let us be the guinea pig. If we're not paying for it and we can do it, even in a smaller sense in the beginning, to see if this will work. Bring the people to Pottstown, bring the people to Royersford, bring the people to Limerick and Upper Providence to see this product work. Let's become a hub of something new and different. Again, I'm not endorsing this, and I'm not endorsing this. I'm looking at options that we possibly can look at to go above and beyond. I think that Peter, who is one of the experts in this industry, is able to tell us. I would love to see the ability to take a group of residents from here to China to ride on the product. Now, I don't have the money to do it. Yeah. Maybe we can find an organization to sponsor. I don't want it to be politicians. I want it to be residents who say, I rode on that. I saw how it worked. It's more powerful to come from you. And I am a resident, of course. I've lived in this area for close to 20 years now, my wife and son and I. But we're politicians too. I want you to say, yeah, we rode on that. And we saw how it worked. And we saw what it can do for our community. This can be a game changer as we look at our communities. There may be other options out there. So my job as a legislator is to say, what else can we do? We need to do a study. Now, we've seen the train studies. I know we have a couple people here who we met with, who brought me the box of the train studies. And we've seen them, and we were laughing about it. We took a picture of the pile of studies that were done on the train. There isn't a person in this room who would disagree putting that train back on the tracks wouldn't be a great solution. But there's things that are holding that up, and we can't wait any longer. And I'm not saying that tomorrow we'll have a fix. I'm not saying in a year we'll have a fix. But the process starts now to look at what the options are. So I'm going to let Peter take another 10, 15 minutes of questions. We do have food over here. The cookies, please eat them, because Alex is going to kill me if you don't. And have the water, whatever else we have. But I just wanted to throw that out there because these were things that we started to sit around the table and discuss. Mark.
Well, everybody remembers when they passed the last transportation bill, Act 44, which is turning out to be a disaster because the truckers went to court over it because their cost of moving goods is enormous. In fact, the turnover in the trucking industry is almost 100% as far as drivers. So what's that mean? What you pay for goods is going to keep going up and up and up because you're having to pay more money to get drivers. And now the Turnpike Commission is basically buying these bonds to pay for SEPTA. And the intent initially was, because the state hasn't done it on a one, they haven't raised the registration fees. Now, I did a little math. If you look at what you spend on gas, you're talking what, 3 hours extra a day? So add that to your work week. Add your fuel cost. Add to what you're paying for a car. I was doing some math on my phone, and you're probably paying out $15,000 just for work, just to go back and forth to work. You don't get a tax break on that. Now, this form of transportation will be a lot cheaper, and you can get up it faster, because even after they finish everything that's done out on 23, you still got that line going westbound on 422. And then when you hit the magic Route 29, all of a sudden, where'd the traffic go? So we didn't even widen the road going west. We're just worried about down to 23. And they can't keep up with it. In fact, I think the transportation secretary said we have more miles of road than New York and New England combined. And what happened was, I actually talked to Rafferty. Rafferty's plan was to do it for 5 years, but he could only get passed for 8. So essentially, we didn't raise the registration fees, and PennDOT, or the Turnpike Commission, even with raising tolls and buying bonds, they can't generate revenue fast enough to expand the roads and maintain what we have. You see how long the construction takes, all the engineering that has to go into it. And what he's talking about here is you don't really need to do a whole lot of extra engineering. You use what you got and put a vehicle that can move more traffic over that same existing road. So it actually makes economic sense. And if you sit down, just figure out what you spend to operate. If you're going to work, if you're still working 5 days a week, what you're spending on a vehicle. I mean, I like it now. I can take the train from, over off of 30 and go all the way down the airport. I don't have to spend money for the parking, which is $11 a day. I don't have to drive my car and sit in traffic, and now it's free because I'm a senior, so I just show my septic pads and it's done. But somebody's got to pay for it. And rail's expensive.
And to your argument, the other things that we don't consider what the cost is for our emergency services in our townships. We don't consider what the health cost is to each one of us who are sitting in that, the aggravation that happens, the wear and tear cost beyond the fuel on the vehicle itself. The PennDOT has done a great job of trying to keep up with our roads. But like you just pointed out, it is nearly impossible with the amount of traffic that flows on these roads.
I'll just give you an idea. I was researching this while we were in here. People drive an average of 13,476 miles a year. The IRS allows you, if you write your car off, 58 cents a mile. So that means you're spending $7,800 a year. That's for your gas, your insurance, and your maintenance. That's what the IRS considers that. Average car payments are running over $500 a month. Tack that on top of that. And that's money, and if anybody tells you a car is an investment, I never might sell a car for more than what you paid for it. No, I don't think so. Not unless the lady I saw that had one of the original Mustangs was worth $350,000.
You're basically saying the system is stuck, right?
So we're losing money by doing nothing, basically. We're losing money.
Yeah, no, we are losing money. And that's the problem. If you don't take these cleverer, more creative solutions, you will keep losing money. And I think that's what he's saying. And it's the same with the trucking industry as well. Yeah, okay, I think, and then up there.
There is another transportation solution, and it's effectively not a transportation solution, which is telecommuting. Get more people working, from their homes or to co-working spaces closer to their home. That frees up roads.
Yeah, that's been around for nearly 50 years now, and it still hasn't worked because people need to meet.
Yep.
How much better is it when we meet to discuss something like this? And so businesses are now saying, look, we'll let you stay at home for 1 day a week if you want to catch up and do things, but we need you here because this is how we plan things, this is how we create things. You need to have face-to-face contact. I think we're going beyond the technology that promised, because the early planners said, oh, you don't have to live in cities at all, you can just scatter across the planet and you'll all be interacting on your screens. Now we're saying no, we actually need to live close together in cities, as close as we can, in order to create the economy. And that's the best cities are those where that is best enabled. And public transport makes that happen. Okay, up and then through. Up on the.
Oh, I was going to agree with, what he was saying over here is, the reason that, a lot of the reasons when I was talking to Joe is, when they were building 422, they were getting rid of the rail line. And there are the powers that be that we don't talk about that made money from that happening. I mean, the auto industry bought all the trolleys, shut them all down, forced everybody to drive a car. And the people that you're not mentioning in what you're doing with your calculations are who's making the money on that. And those are the people that want to keep the things going the way they are now, because they've always been making money doing it that way. We need to reverse that and go back to the way things were, 50 years ago before we all moved out of the cities.
I think you can't neglect the politics of things, but I don't actually see too big a conspiracy at that time, because every city in the world basically closed down their trams and started building roads and putting cars and buses. And everybody accepted it. This was the new world. We were going to create a modern city. And the old one was dying, and it was all about steel wheels on steel tracks. Who needs that? It's old. Turns out it was pretty good. So now we've got something new that offers something better. I hope it's better. I think it is. But if we don't get the public behind it, it won't happen, and we'll be stuck in the old stuff. Well, the politics is still there. The politics is that people choose, and we need to choose carefully. You need to know more about it. Now we've got 3 or 4 hands up now, okay.
I think this might be a question more for Joe, but speaking of politics, like how would SEPTA and the suburban lines, how would they respond to this kind of a system that might draw traffic away from them? And I think there was some talk about these lines connecting to the SEPTA lines. But I'm thinking, like, I don't want to drive from my house to the station, then get on this trackless thing, then go to, something on Route 30, then go to Suburban Station, and then get on the subway. So that seems to sort of defeat the purpose. So I'm just wondering how SEPTA fits into this.
Well, if we look at SEPTA today, SEPTA has its issues, their financial issues. They need to upgrade the systems that they have right now. So we have not sat with SEPTA yet and had this conversation on this. I'll be honest with you on that front. But when you look at what you just said, leaving your home, going to a station, driving, and I guess it's because the way I was brought up. We drove to the station, you got on the Long Island Railroad, you had to change trains in Jamaica, you went into Manhattan into Penn Station, where you walked across the road or from Penn Station, got on a subway that you took down to where you worked. And what did that do? Your mileage on your car was saved. You got to either work on the train or sleep, as a lot of people do. The train was packed, and if you didn't get there early enough, you had to stand the whole way in. But the quality of life was a little bit different. When you got home, you may have been frustrated that the train was delayed or whatever it was, but you weren't driving on a highway for 2 and 3 hours. You weren't cutting people off anywhere you could to get that 3 seconds ahead of where it is. Is there a perfect fix to this? No. I even went as far as to think out of the box even further. We have an airport in Limerick. Well, we all know that people do commute by helicopter. What happens if a charter helicopter comes in and says, for $150 each way, you can fly into Philadelphia? Now, I couldn't afford it, but there will be those people who can't afford it. We have a river that runs. Is there a possibility of putting something on the river that would run us down, into Philadelphia? I don't know. These are way out of the box thinking. Not the helicopter so much. That's a possibility, but expensive, but it's possible. But there's no direct line that we're going to be able to get. This train once did run directly into Philadelphia. That would be the ultimate plan to be able to do that. But the way I look at it is we have to find a solution to at least get some of the traffic off. And not everybody's going to do it. But if we get 1,000 people a day who ride on this, if we were to use the trackless tram, that's 1,000 less cars a day that sits on 422. That opens it up a little. My hope would be 5,000 people would participate because of the environmental impact and the time impact. But I wish I could say, yeah, we have an easy way in and out of the city and this is the way it's going to work, but unfortunately it doesn't.
And Pam in the back.
So we've talked about all the good things and all the no-brainers that this seems to be. So in your experience and some of the experience that some of these other companies have done this and some of the cities that have done it, what are some of the obstacles that they've encountered that we could expect to encounter, maybe 2 or 3 that we're not thinking about?
Yeah, this is what we write books about, trying to get stories of how hard it is in some places and how it's done. And we all learnt from Portland, because that was one of the first cities in America and Australia, and even in Europe, that put a light rail in instead of a highway. How did they do that? It was mainly a mass movement of people who demanded it. 1,000 Friends of Oregon got together and said, we don't want the Mount Hood Expressway, we want a light rail. And it worked, and then it started spreading across the whole city. So it took off. And I think that's the kind of thing that will happen with the first city, maybe out here, with a trackless tram. There is an element in which you need to try it and see. But to get there, it's usually a political process, and you've got a few champions in there who lead that, but there are also some very crafty bureaucrats who are unlocking the barriers in the way to change that. How do you get the money from a highway fund put into a light rail? That was what they had to overcome, and they found how to do it legally. And in this case, there's probably 100 regulations you need to overcome, because this is very different technology. The whole thing about having an autonomous vehicle going into the system, and it's on the road. There'll be all kinds of rules that will have to be looked at, and clever people will have to work. That's why we want to do a trial in Perth, to try and show how to do that. But you can do that here too. So the main thing is to give it a try and take it step by step. And that's how communities learn from it and show others how to do it. And lead. You've now got a leader. He sensed that there's something wrong here, and that, he's saying he doesn't really want to push this case. Well, I'll push him until he does. But this is clearly an option that needs to be on the table, and in the process of doing that, we'll find various things that may be showstoppers. But if they're not, they'll need to be dealt with, and we'll get something. But we'll give it a try. That's all I can say.
We have a question over here, you've been waiting.
Which one?
And 2 more. Right
That
here.
one, Pam.
Pam, and then 2 more over here.
So first, to answer her point, I go to Philadelphia every single day, and I'll take it in a heartbeat. I'll definitely take my car, go to the train station, hop, and then hop, and then hop. So this is a great solution, but it's a long-term solution, and it'll take some time. How about an HOV lane on 422?
Well, there's... So an HOV lane. So that sounds easy. It's just as difficult, because the infrastructure that has to go into place on 422 will be massive. It'll probably be more than what we have to do, because you only have 2 lanes each way. So you'd be taking a whole lane, or you'd be taking the shoulder, which is an option that we're seeing that's about to go into effect on the Schuylkill. If you've seen on the Schuylkill, they've put in speed limit signs all the way over to the right, and Secretary Richardson has talked about this program where the Schuylkill lanes will be open, the shoulders, to more traffic. In Peter's example, just adding a lane isn't going to solve the problem. Will this take time? It might. We need to do a study. We've gone this long, we might as well give it the right look that we need to do. I think HOV lanes are wonderful. I also think that people don't observe the rules of the HOV lane. So you do have people have a blow-up doll in the front seat to say they have 2 people in the car. We've all seen it, especially coming from New York. You know, you see the HOV lane, go, was that a person in that seat over there? We even know someone has put a skeleton in the front seat of their car to say they have another body in the front seat of the car. So a fake skeleton. So, right, yeah, they're dying to get to work. And I don't mean to make light of it, because an HOV lane is great. Now, before we lived in the Philadelphia area, we lived in Miami. Miami had, how many lanes, Pam? 6 or 8 each way on I-95, and a dedicated HOV lane. And we still sat in traffic forever, because there was no train in Miami at the time either. So the HOV lane, where it looked like it was going to help, in the morning, again, I'd see those people and go, he's got one person in the car, and he's in the HOV. Where's the trooper? Now you have to have a trooper that sits on the side of the road to wait for that person to come with the one person in the car to give them a ticket to hold up the HOV lane, because now you have to give a ticket in the HOV lane because the person only had one person in the car. And you go, oh, this is great. I'm so glad I'm in this lane. I wish I could say it was an easy option. I wish I could say tomorrow we can go out on the 422 and do it. We can't. It'll take time.
With the idea of the HOV lane, because I lived in Northern Virginia, DC area, and you had the HOV lane. But the problem is those people finding, like HOV would be great, but then it's the matter of finding people that are going to the same place you are to be able to do HOV. I mean, I drive an hour to work, and I would love to have, you know, some of my coworkers to be able to drive, but like none of us live anywhere near each other to be able to kind of pull that off, and that's kind of why, like, HOV sounds great if you can find somebody to go with you in that lane, or you happen to be riding, you know, that same direction.
Wait, I know Pam had a question before.
There's no city in the world that gets above the 1.1 persons per car on average. The car enables you to be flexible, and therefore you get flexible land uses, and you can never bring it together. That's why the fixed transit will actually create more density around stations. You'll get more coherent ability to go together. It'll be on the train.
Yeah.
Could you just quickly elaborate on the cost of rail versus the trackless tram? And that's what I noticed when I really researched it, was the absolute difference in cost. So could you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, I didn't say much, did I? But because there's so many other issues, but in the end you've got to get the cost that applies here. What I gave you was the cost of a 3-car set and a station at $3 million, and that is if you have a 10-kilometre project, then there's $30 million for the whole thing. But that doesn't mean you can have the road already. You can put it in a road and start, but it wouldn't be completely free to run the whole way. So there will be more money needed to do that, and it'll be different in each city. We've got a route pretty well worked out that will need some work on it, but not much. There's certainly no big flyover bridges or tunnels or anything like that, because that does cost a lot. So the main thing is to take on the fact that there will be some areas where the traffic will need to shift or be narrowed down, so that you go from 3 lanes to 2 lanes, or parking will be removed, that kind of thing. And that is a negotiation you have to have with the community. And some people will not like it, but it'll be a very small number who will have a lesser option, and many more people who will have a much better option as a result. And that's why you need good political leadership to sort it out. There's one down the back there.
Quick question. It sounds like the system that you're describing and everyone's talking about it running on 422 would be best. When it runs inside a city system, does it stop at traffic signals like cars do, or does it have some sort of pass-through?
best thing it can go through signals, and that already happens with most light rail systems in the world, and they can be programmed to be get a full way through, so the signals change it automatically, or it can be done, you know, in sometimes or hardly at all way.
So all traffic would stop as it went through an intersection?
It can, yes. So look, let me show you this. This is the final word. There's no sound on this. Is there a reason for that? Where's the IT guy? But it does. It's okay. I'll explain it. This is the CRRC. They produced trains since the 1930s, way before the revolution and all that. It's an old company, and they started producing light rail, and then they found it didn't fit into their cities. So they've now taken the tracks out and said, we're going to produce something that doesn't need track, and this is how they've produced the trackless tram, or the ART, Autonomous Rail Rapid Transit. And it quickly explains how it works with the recharge system to the batteries, quick charging, what could be on 10 minutes. The range then was 25 kilometres, and it's now longer than that. The green tram was the first one they did. Got lots of things like dual redundant multi-axis steering systems, whatever that is. And it's got a turning circle, so it turns at right angles. It's like a bus to be able to turn around. So that's like a light rail. 15 metres is good. You can see there it says 3.83 metres, but it can be brought down to 2.6 even. And it goes up steep hills, 13% inclines. And it, of course, runs well when it's got a nice, easy way through like this. It's got anti-collision warning systems around the vehicles. Lots of the innovations that we now are getting in some of the cars. And a lifetime 25 years, that's minimum. Much more longer than a bus. Because it's electric, it doesn't have the big engines, the heavy engines, it's half the weight. 1 millimetre perfect, they say, get it coming into station, so perfect alignment, very easy to get on with a wheelchair. Strange looking people. And it has those doors that many of the modern train systems have. At stations, lots of standing room because it's an urban vehicle. Don't like Delight tram, I don't think they've used that since. And that's the thing, it's a very good ride quality. You will have a driver, some signalling like that. So when we rode it in Zhuzhou, it did go through the lights like this. It was able to go quite quickly through, and then the whole question of how it can cope with an accident. So there's an accident, what does it do? It checks in with the control centre and they say go around there, so you override it, and it can be flexibly moved away. Now that's, what's that? It goes off the track. It can be steered then. So it's in a steering mode like a bus then. And then it gets back on the track and you don't need to steer it any longer. And you can get 5 cars, so you can go up to 500. 500 Chinese anyway, we reckon we'll get about 400 Australians. Probably 200 if they're like Charlie. Where is it?
Charlie's in the back.
Yeah. And so there's the different models that are coming out, and that's the one we were on. This is the new one apparently. So it complements the other lines. It says they can run in snow and ice, but hasn't done it yet. It's used ours in the humid southern areas.
Well, that one looks like it's got pavement mounted LiDAR, which would keep it there, snow or not.
Yeah, well that's right. So that's one way solution. So without rail, within control. I don't know what that means, but it's a pretty good system. I think that'll do it.
Yes, I want to have one more comment. Where's Dave? Dave, would you come up? Some of you may know Dave, some of you may not. Dave is with the Pottstown Health and Wellness Foundation, who has been a huge partner in this community for a long time, not only for education, business, but also for health and wellness, as what they were created for. So I just wanted to give Dave the opportunity to say a couple words as we look at this, not only for a transportation option, but also as we talk about a health and wellness opportunity too.
You did say a few words. Yes, yeah, that's right. I just want to thank you all for being here. I think in many respects, we see something like this project being able to leverage jobs here in our home base. Many of you do commute and travel to King of Prussia or Reading or Lancaster, et cetera. And I think the long-term opportunity for the best quality of life really is for us to have jobs here at home. And so I think it's these kind of opportunities, whether they're manufactured here or simply being a center and locus for jobs for the surrounding growing communities, is something I think this particular project would support. I think in many respects we know we're in a region that's growing. We also know that Warren County is very wealthy. We would like to have some of those resources come to the western part of the county. That's been getting better recently. We just want to see more of that. And so when we're looking at things like health equity, we're looking at things like educational equity, looking at school funding model. We're also looking at transportation equity. I think this is a perfect way to describe what this could bring, our transportation opportunities and job opportunities to the western part of the county and the Tri-County area. I'll leave it at that. That's all part of health and wellness and being able to access other opportunities for your family. So back to you, Jim.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank again Dr. Peter Newman and also the other gentleman behind the scenes, Dr. Charles Hargroves. I said to my staff when we started to do this, I said, we've gone to the end of the earth to try and find an option. I really don't know if we can go much further than Australia to look for an option, but if anyone knows any further, let me know. The moon, maybe. But all kidding aside, we all know that we have an issue. We all know that we need to find a solution. And when you find the solution, it doesn't take an hour, like I said before. It takes time. It takes time for us to look into options. It takes time for us to work with our partners. It takes time for us to work with our local governments and municipalities, the state, and at some levels, the federal government. But tonight we started to put, I hate to say it like this, the train on the tracks. To put the rubber on the road. Whatever, with the boots in the, all right, I had to go for one of them, come on. I see Evan shaking his head. No, I had to say one of the puns. Oh, thanks. But we started the process to look for a solution. And I hope that as we go over these next few months, we find a solution that can work with us. And I look forward to your input into different ideas. I'm not an expert. You know, I see that there's an issue. I know we have to find a solution. And there's nothing that's wrong with any idea that someone may come up with. Come to us, talk to us. Our hope is that we will get the grant to be able to do the study on options beyond the train. We'll be able to build a consensus. And if this is one of the options that we really want to move forward with, we'll be able to take a group with us out into the community. Before we wrap up, we have Dan Whean here, who's the Borough Council President here in Pottstown. Dan, you had a question?
No, comment. I just
Good.
conferred with my fellow councilor.
Trinita.
And we're convinced that we can convince council to offer Pottstown as the first pilot program.
Thank you.
All right.
So now I need to call China. I'll have a little bit language issue, but I think you'll go with me, yeah. But again, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. There's comment cards in the back if you'd like to fill it out. There's information. Peter and Charlie will be around. My staff and myself will be around here. Please feel free, eat the food. Please feel free to hang around. Now, there is another tomorrow. What's the tomorrow's?
Veterans ID cards.
What is it?
Veterans discount.
Veterans discount cards. But tomorrow, Peggy, you may want to just say something about tomorrow, because I want you to know that there's some of the exciting, Twyla left. Some of the exciting things in investments and things that are going on here in Pottstown already. And I just want to give Peggy a plug to be able to give some information about what's happening in town tomorrow.
So good evening. At the Hill School, tomorrow there's an investors conference that's being held, and you will get to learn more about what's going on in Pottstown. We have to tell the story better because there's a lot going on in Pottstown these days. I am a big believer in the job should be here, and we shouldn't need to, we should leave because we want to leave, not because we have to leave. So we have a panel. I have the great fortune to be on a panel with Councilman Nguyen and Representative Cerisi, talking about really kind of the government perspective, the government angle. And then there is also a woman entrepreneur-led panel, which will be concurrently. There is also 2 keynote speakers that are being brought in that will talk about social innovation as well as community development. So it's the Hill School, and it is from 8 to 3:30, and people are invited. And Twyla probably will kill me because now if you all show up, they would like you to register at least. There will be tours around town, and we'll talk about some of the projects and the opportunities here. So that's it.
So Peter and Charlie will be there with me. They didn't know that, but then they have a flight to Charlottesville in the afternoon. So if you do come tomorrow, you also have the opportunity to see them. So again, I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again soon and finding a solution to this issue. Thank you.